Speaking of cartoonish propaganda, this is a tweet from your boy Nick Cruz about the recent propaganda about Hamas rapes. And Nick says so eloquently, did you guys know that hundreds of Hamas soldiers died during October 7th? You know there were Apache helicopters raining hellfire indiscriminately above during October 7th, which killed many Israelis, by the way. Despite this chaos, mass death, and how dangerous this was for Hamas, Zionists would have you believe they paused combat in order to commit mass rape with Apache helicopters and the IDF shooting at them. Who believes this stupid shit? Well said, Nick. Very, very well said. And Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, two of my all-time favorite journalists, recently did a kind of breakdown about this exact propaganda in the New York Times. And I didn't clip a whole bunch of this segment, but I want you to see this real quick because they really, really lay it out. If I have the clip, oh, here it is. Here it is. I always lose these clips. I need to name them better.
Addressing that after so many debunked Israeli claims, the dozens of beheaded babies, the baby burned in an oven, the baby cut out of a woman's fetus, the fetus cut out of the womb. Now Israel and its supporters are really doubling down on these claims of mass rape by militants on October 7th. And we pointed out a lot of the inconsistencies in those stories, but it persists.
Nick just pointed them out.
The Biden administration has really tried to push it as well. They've made a thing out of it. Hillary Clinton came out and made a thing out of it. CNN, Jake Tapper has tried to make a thing out of it. And now the New York Times has come out with a new story that people who buy into Israeli claims are really promoting, that making the claim that Hamas used sexual violence as a tool of war, that there was a deliberate effort to use sexual violence as a tool of war on October 7th. But once again, people are overlooking the countervailing evidence and the inconsistencies even inside this own story, including the very quiet acknowledgement. And this is what a lot of the story is about. It's basically an elaborate effort to justify the fact that there's no physical evidence.
Yeah.
And also no testimony still.
Yeah, so
that's what the story basically is.
Screams without words. I mean, that's a quote from an eyewitness who actually wasn't an eyewitness. But it's kind of like, we don't have the words, so we're just going to hear the screams anyway by generating enough innuendo to make you believe that this actually took place. And you really have to harbor a lot of academics would call it Orientalist anti-Arab racism to believe that all this was true. I mean, this narrative, it's like the Central Park Five for pantsuit feminists and pussy hat liberals who think that Arab men are just like these savages who could actually storm into another country or storm through some border in a military operation and just stop in the middle of an intense confrontation with a powerful military and stand in a circle around a woman and start gang raping her and cutting her breasts off and playing with them, because those are the testimonies contained in this article. But as you said, Aaron, the article by Jeffrey Gettleman, who is just like notorious for these kinds of pieces about Africa and other places, it blames the lack of forensic evidence, the complete absence of any forensic evidence on Jewish burial rituals. Basically, the Jews bury their dead too quickly in 24 hours. So we just couldn't get at any of these bodies. So we're just going to go off of all these weird testimonies from dubious individuals who were supplied to Jeffrey Gettleman and Anat Schwartz and Adam Sella by the Israeli government, because this is not Me Too. Me Too was like a fairly organic thing. Maybe there'd be a group of like 3 or 5 women who would get together in a workplace to accuse the boss. But this is a statewide conspiracy to justify a genocidal assault on an occupied people as international support falters. And it happened 2 months. It really cohered 2 months after the assault began. So I don't know. Do you want to go through some of the key claims here, or how should we do this?
So you should watch that whole stream because they go into the weeds on who the sources are and all that stuff. But we all know that the New York Times is full of shit. I still read the New York Times sometimes, but you know, they totally missed the Nord Stream thing. They let us into the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, the Ukraine, they've lied about everything. And just to put a cherry on that, I want to take a little trip down memory lane about another racist hit piece that the New York Times did to promote, you know, the U.S. involvement with squashing ISIS back during the Obama years. But the New York Times did a piece called Caliphate, and they had to retract it. It was an entire podcast. And so let me just walk you through this real quick, just to like ice this cake of New York Times bullshit. New York Times retracts core of hit podcast series Caliphate on ISIS. This is from December 10th of 2020. So this is a very recent example of how terrible the New York Times is, right? So let me just read this to you real quick. The New York Times has retracted one, and this is from NPR, by the way. The New York Times has retracted one of its core hit 2018 podcast series Caliphate after an internal review found the paper failed to heed red flags indicating that the man it relied upon for its narrative about the allure of terrorism could not be trusted to tell the truth. The newspaper has reassigned its star terrorism reporter, Rukmini Callimachi, who hosted the series. So it's just like when Catholic priests molest kids, they don't get fired, they get reassigned. When people lie in the New York Times, they don't get fired, they just get reassigned this, you know, to the Israel division or whatever they're doing these days. Moving on. Canadian authorities this fall accused the man Shiroz Chowdhury of lying about those activities. He currently faces criminal charges in federal court in Ontario of perpetrating a terrorism hoax. We fell in love with the fact that we had gotten a member of ISIS who would describe his life in the caliphate and would describe his crimes. New York Times executive editor Dean Beckett tells NPR. Dean Beckett, by the way, is the guy who ran the Trump-Russia thing. And they actually did an entire documentary called The Fourth Wall about them covering, you know, the New York Times intense coverage of Trump-Russia collusion, which was a complete hoax. So it's not a surprise that, you know, this was another piece that they were running around that same time. Anyway, Dean Beckett tells the NPR in an interview on Thursday, I think we were so in love with it that when we saw the evidence that maybe it was a fabulist, when we saw evidence that he was making some of it up, we didn't listen hard enough. God damn it. The exact same thing they did with the Trump stories. Well, we just wanted to believe that he was Putin's puppet, so we just kept publishing it. We were in love with it. Oh my God. How do people take the New York Times seriously anymore? Anyone that like really thinks the New York Times is like a very credible, decent source of news is very naive. Very naive. The highly produced series was announced to much fanfare in March of 2018 at the South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas, as a worthy complement to the paper's hit news podcast, The Daily. So they're at South by Southwest with all their hipster buddies, like, yo, we got this great story about Muslim terror. I can't wait to show it to you. And it was all fake. So that's the kind of world we live in, where the New York Times just runs cartoonish propaganda. And it's not just the New York Times. Just to ice this off with one last little piece of info for you. This guy, Alan McLeod, he was banned from Twitter the other day for, I think it was for posting this. But basically what he's saying here is, not mentioned here by the Daily Mail, is that these 4 girls, in quotation marks, are all IDF soldiers, not innocent children. Shocking and ridiculous propaganda. So you see the lengths that these people will go to, you know, hold on to the narrative. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, it looks like my YouTube stream's on. So, I mean, I'm playing stuff that's all public knowledge and been on YouTube, but if anything ever does get shut off, I'm over on Rumble, just rumble.com/POLYTICKS Polyticks. So anyway, I just wanted to show you just the cartoonish propaganda around what's going on. And thank God for voices like Max and Aaron, who are brave enough. I mean, they just have gigantic balls and they need to be praised on every level, because there are podcasts that are discussing this news and those guys are out there in the field reporting on it. And without them, no one would be discussing it. So thank you, Max. Thank you, Aaron. Love you guys.